Did you know the character Sister Sonic was gonna be, and we're quoting here, a flirtatious and sexy bounty hunter? In today's video, we're gonna separate fact from fiction with some new discoveries about the cancelled Sister Sonic RPG. We'll show new footage and behind-the-scenes info for Sonic Day, and finally reveal the plot of Sonic Chronicles 2. Fans have been wanting to hear it for 15 years, and we got it for them. Let's go through these cancelled games chronologically, starting with Sister Sonic. Back in 1991, Japanese studio Nihon Falcom released a game called Popful Mail for the PC-88 home computer. It was a side-scrolling action RPG starring a female bounty hunter named Mail. A few years later, rumors spread that Sega wanted to localize a Sega CD version of the game for America and replace Mail with Sonic's long-lost sister. They basically did the same thing with Puyo Puyo back then too. Sega was worried foreigners wouldn't buy it, so they rebranded it as Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, just like how Nintendo turned Doki Doki Panic into Super Mario 2. Or at least that's how the story goes, but not a single screenshot has ever been seen. If you go looking for sources that Sister Sonic ever existed, the only citations are Electronic Gaming Monthly. More specifically, just a couple sentences in the magazine's gossip section, later called the Rumor Mill. The rumor was that Sister Sonic would be at an upcoming toy fair, but that never happened. In fact, it was never shown anywhere at all. EGM's gossip was unsighted, with no reference to press releases, dev quotes, or even anonymous sources. So we had to wonder, was Sister Sonic ever a real thing? Or just a rumor masquerading as fact for 30 years? We've exposed fake cancelled games in the past, and this looked like it was going to be another one. So we went looking through old Japanese magazines, and eventually we were able to find primary sources proving Sister Sonic did exist, but the rumors were only half true. In the November 1992 issue of Japanese magazine Beep Megadrive, the director of Sega Falcom sits down for an interview and announces 5 games currently in development. One of them was Sister Sonic, which he says is further in development than any of their other games. And it's not just a reskin like Mean Bean Machine. Sister Sonic's gonna be a full-on remake, but she's not actually Sonic's sister. We're gonna quote him at length here. Keep in mind, Popful Mail was originally developed by Nihon Falcom, and Sega Falcom was a joint venture to bring Nihon's PC games to Sega consoles. Director Yano says, Sega Falcom does more than just port Nihon Falcom titles, but reinterprets Nihon Falcom hit series in its own Sega Falcom way. You could say we're cooking them up in a completely different form. I want to emphasize that Nihon's titles exhibit a different thought process and perspective on games. Among them is Sister Sonic, a remake of Popful Mail. This doesn't mean she's Sonic's actual sister, more like a female relative of the Sonic family. The reason for creating this new character and remaking Popful Mail is that it makes more sense for us to use Sonic, who's already popular all around the world. Sister Sonic is the game of our first 5 releases that we've made the most progress on so far. Further down the page it says, Sister Sonic is an action RPG based on Popful Mail, starring the first female Sonic character, Sister Sonic, as the main character. The protagonist being a bounty hunter hasn't changed, but Sister Sonic isn't a cute character like Mail. She's a more mature girl. Expect her to have a flirtatious and sexy charm. Of course, the story's been rewritten to fit the new characters. It has more action than the original, paired with the crisp animation and sound only possible on a CD-ROM. It'll release in Japan and overseas at nearly the same time with Japanese subtitles. So let's clear up some misinformation. We're specifically debunking Wikipedia here, but pretty much all the English language coverage of Sister Sonic makes the same claims, because they all pull from EGM's gossip. So first of all, Sister Sonic wasn't an American localization of Popful Mail. It was a remake releasing worldwide, including Japan. Second, like we said, Sister Sonic wasn't Sonic's sister. She was a sexy relative. And third, Sega wasn't trying to pass the game off as an original work. They were always upfront that it was building on top of Popful Mail's foundation. Actually, if they had tried to pass it off as an original game, it probably wouldn't have gotten cancelled. We bought this book from Japan. It says when Popful Mail fans heard their favorite game was getting transformed into Sonic, they started a mail-in campaign asking Sega to faithfully port Popful Mail to Sega CD. A vehement protest from fans, it says. They must have sent a ton of letters because Sega rolled over and did exactly that. Popful Mail for Sega CD released in Japan in 1994, and in America a year later. Even without Sonic, though, it was still a remake. Just look at the PC-88 original compared to the Sega CD version. It's virtually unrecognizable. Now that's all cleared up, you're probably wondering, would Sister Sonic have been any good? Probably yes, actually. US reviewers scored the Popful Mail remake at about 8 out of 10, and these days it pops up on a lot of Sega CD top 10 lists. It's kind of a cult classic and pretty pricey if you want to get a legit copy. In the 90s, it was praised for its visuals, cutscenes, music, which you're hearing now, and the voice acting was impressive for its time.
Most impressive, I must admit. Who are you?
I'm Mail, Popful Mail. Right now I'm after a dangerous magician called Muttonhead. There's a big reward for him.
Presumably, Sister Sonic would have gotten a similar reception, but you know, even better because it's Sonic. And it probably would have taken Sonic fans another decade to get an internet connection and find out it was originally some other game. Sister Sonic could have been an interesting chapter in the canon, and the franchise's first RPG. But we'll never find out, because die-hard Mail fans got it cancelled. After Sister Sonic got scrapped, there's only ever been one RPG in Sonic's 30-year history. But there might have been a whole series of them if it wasn't for one man. Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood was a Nintendo DS game developed by BioWare, the same studio who made Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect. Chronicles ended on a cliffhanger. Sonic says we'll find out what happens in the next episode. Tails promises another game, and the last thing you see is the end ? BioWare said they already had a precise idea what would happen in the sequel, but unfortunately it never got made. For the past 15 years, Sonic fans have been wondering how the story would have continued, so we talked to lead designer Miles Holmes to get some answers. But before we dive into this game, a word from this episode's sponsor, Buyee. If you've ever used American sites to buy things from Japan, you've probably noticed how much sellers jack up the price. It can be a lot. This is where Buyee comes in. Buyee is a service that places orders or bids on your behalf on Japanese shopping and auction sites, then ships the items straight to you without any absurd price hikes. This includes sites like Rakuten, Amazon Japan, and Yahoo Japan Auction. You can even use Buyee to get memorabilia like Sonic figurines and anime goodies. So if you've been wanting to get a hold of a Japanese game or piece of merch but don't want to pay insane rates, this service will let you get your hands on the stuff for a more affordable price. Buyee is easy to use and offers support in several languages, which of course includes English. They also ship worldwide, including to North America, Europe, and Oceania. Buyee has over half a dozen international shipping methods, multiple payment methods, and 4 different insurance plans to match your needs. And if you're not aware, the value of the yen is very favorable to the US dollar right now, resulting in even greater savings. Buyee is also giving DidYouKnowGaming viewers 10% off their first purchase for signing up through the link below. So if you want to try out this great service and get 10% off your first order, check out Buyee using our link below. And now, back to Sonic Chronicles. And for some context, let's sum up the first game for folks who didn't play it or don't remember. Don't worry, we'll make it quick. So, thousands of years ago, there were 2 warring echidna kingdoms, the Knuckles clan and the Nocturnus clan. They were bitter rivals fighting over territory and Chaos Emeralds, but fast forward to today and they're all extinct, except for one last echidna called Knuckles. As the last of his bloodline, he spends his days in solitude guarding the Master Emerald. At the start of Chronicles 1, Knuckles gets kidnapped by some unknown warriors. After rescuing him, Sonic and friends find out those warriors were part of the Nocturnus tribe. One of them's a female called Shade. Seeing these ancient echidnas blows Knuckles' mind, cause he thought he was the last surviving echidna, but apparently no. The rest of the Nocturnus have been imprisoned in another dimension called the Twilight Cage for thousands of years. The mysterious god Argus locked them in there, and trapped a bunch of alien races from other planets in there too, though no one knows why. Shade's squad came to Earth to steal the Master Emerald and use its power to free the rest of her tribe. But later it turns out the Nocturnus' chief, a guy named Ix, has a secret evil plan. After the whole tribe's freed and back on Earth, Ix is gonna wage war to conquer the planet. This comes as a shock to Shade, who wants no part in a war of aggression, so she joins up with Team Sonic. Ix takes the Master Emerald and warps back to the Twilight Cage. Our heroes chase after him, yada yada yada, Super Sonic defeats Ix, and the rest of the Nocturnus are left to rot in the Twilight Cage. With their mission complete, Team Sonic heads home, but realize time had been flowing slower in the Twilight Dimension while they were gone. It felt like a few hours to them, but several years passed back on Earth, and Eggman's taken over the world since no one was there to stop him. And the game ends there, on a cliffhanger. And here's how it would have continued, straight from Sonic Chronicles lead designer Miles Holmes.
Picking it up from the cliffhanger, they come back and it's now Eggman's world, right? So that's a little bit the Back to the Future 2 kind of vibe. We talked about like Skynet in Terminator 2. You know, when you get to see the future, when you get to see what Kyle Reese is from, it's like, but it's all Eggman stuff, you know. So in this case, it's Eggman is basically unchecked by Sonic, has been able to do what he's always wanted to do, right? Take over and remake the world in his image. So a lot of the population has been rounded up and they're prisoners or they're slaves or whatever. And you've got machines. Eggman's machines are, you know, this very dystopic kind of Terminator future. So part of that would have been the fun of being able to go to, you know, famous world landmarks and seeing them remade in this Eggman style. So, you know, like going to Paris and seeing like Eggman's gear all over the Eiffel Tower, sort of watching down with a big eye or something like that.
When Sonic and company return to Eggman's Earth, their ship crashes and everyone's scattered to the winds, so the player's following multiple parties and populating them in different locations, always on the run, always fighting to see another day. Eventually, they get to the point where they're freeing populations from Eggman's captivity so they can build a multinational army to storm Eggman's base and restore world order. Just as they're about to do exactly that, Argus shows up. If you recall, Argus was the Mega God alluded to in the first game, much worse than Eggman. Even Super Sonic's not strong enough to beat Argus, so in spite of everything, Sonic and Eggman join forces to take him down. Eggman uses his Mega Death Laser to fire Super Sonic out like a bullet to break through Argus's defenses, thus ending the first boss phase. With Argus weakened, the Twilight Cage is thrown open, and everyone who is trapped inside is set free and joins in a massive climactic battle to finish off Argus once and for all. By the time everything wraps up, Knuckles is freed his fellow echidnas, along with everyone else in the cage, and together with Shade, now he's got the potential to continue his bloodline. Eggman runs off, yelling, "Until next time, Sonic!" And so, the status quo's back to normal. The end. Well, except for the final teaser. It was established in the first game that the Twilight Cage is a pocket dimension where the Nocturnus and other alien races are imprisoned, but you never know why. The truth would have been revealed in the sequel. Long ago, an oracle told Argus that someday he'd die at the hands of a mortal, so Argus traveled the universe, locking up entire races that could possibly be a threat, in hopes of escaping the prophecy of his own death. But in the final teaser, it'd be revealed that the oracle's prediction was actually a trick. By gathering up the most powerful races in the universe, Argus was unknowingly building a super team that could destroy him.
It was basically a manipulation. So we're left with this notion of, okay, well, who's the Oracle? Who's this trickster god that got him to do this in the first place? Because obviously he wanted all of this to happen. He wanted Argus defeated, and now with him out of the way, the longer question that would have held, that could have been used over the series is, okay, so we've defeated this one god, but now there's this other god that made all these things happen. Why did he do that? What was it for? And will it eventually threaten us? And you know, if the series was going to continue, then yes, obviously, this is going to be a problem, and we'll come back to it.
It wasn't another cliffhanger, more like a teaser that left room for more sequels. BioWare would have considered their work finished with this duology, but hoped another studio, or Sega themselves, would continue Chronicles as a long-running series. So that begs the question, why didn't Chronicles 2 get made? The first game sold about 1 million copies. It was BioWare's first ever handheld game, and they considered it a success. Review scores came in around 75%, pretty on par with Sonic games of that era. Chronicles was basically free money and brand exposure for Sega, so they were happy as well. In fact, Sonic Team told BioWare they wanted to use Shade and Argus in their own games, and the BioWare guys were thrilled to hear it. But there was one little problem: the Sonic comics. A lot of the comics published from 1994 to 2006 were authored by Ken Penders. In Ken's view, the characters he created for the comics belonged to him, not Sega. Shade in Chronicles is similar to Knuckles' girlfriend Julie Sue from Knuckles the Echidna issue 4. Likewise, the Nocturnus clan bears resemblance to the Dark Legion from issue 1, the Twilight Cage is akin to the Twilight Zone from issue 17, and so on. Ken started copywriting all his creations 2 months after Chronicles launched, then a series of lawsuits kicked off between Ken, Sega, BioWare, and the comic book publisher. Sega's position was basically that they own the Sonic brand, therefore they own the rights to everything published in Sonic comics. Long story short, Sega wanted the fight to stay between Ken and the comic book company, but ultimately got pulled in anyway, and the whole thing dragged on for years.
You know, I find it very puzzling. Honestly, I've worked with other people's IP for a long time. as he has. And I've never had any kind of notion that I own anything that I'm doing in somebody else's sandbox. I think if Sega had taken him seriously and litigated properly, it very quickly would have gone away. But it was probably a series of unforced errors that led to the result that we got.
We reached out to Ken so he could give his side of the story. You can pause and read his full response if you like, because some of the legal details aren't otherwise findable online. But to sum it up, he sees himself as a small creator defending his work from billion-dollar corporations who want to take it for themselves. Those corporations owe him millions of bucks for using it in Sonic Chronicles, and their lawyers couldn't convince a judge that Ken was off his rocker. Maybe Sega feels they should own these characters, but they never had that in writing. More recently, Ken made some artwork for Sonic NFTs to establish stronger legal ownership over his characters, and Sega haven't tried to stop him. Maybe because they know they can't. They're priced at 100 grand each, in case you're curious. Ken says he's not an unreasonable man. If Sega ever wants to pay him for the rights to make Sonic Chronicles 2, he'll happily sit down at the negotiating table. Keep in mind, all that's Ken's words, not ours, and we gave this script to both Miles and Ken before publication to make sure we presented everything accurately and without bias. As for who's right, well, that's for you to decide. Either way, there's never going to be any re-releases of Sonic Chronicles or a sequel until a deal's made in the courts. That'll probably never happen, which means Sonic Chronicles 2 will never be anything more than the plot outline you heard in this video. Back in 2018, Sega was impressed with the successes of British developer Nitrome, so they invited them to come up with a Sonic game. Then they did. It was called Sonic Day, a one-touch runner for smartphones with a new Genesis-style level added every single day. Mario Run meets Sonic the Hedgehog, basically. We spoke to Nitrome director Mat Annal to get the full story and never-before-seen footage. Sonic Day was based on Nitrome's wildly successful 2016 game Leap Day, which was downloaded over 10 million times purely by word of mouth, without 1 cent spent on advertising. Nitrome's been making games for 20 years. Maybe you've heard of some recent ones like Bomb Chicken and Shovel Knight Dig. Anyway, they just happened to run into Sega reps at GDC, who after hearing about Leap Day, asked if they'd be interested in pitching a Leap-like Sonic. Over the next years, Sega tracked Leap Day's metrics, had Nitrome provide some mock-up screenshots, and eventually build the demo you're seeing now. Matt and a couple other guys whipped up one level in 6 weeks, but of course they would have had a lot more levels and a bigger team if it went into full production. The pitch went all the way up the chain from Sega of Europe to Sega of America to Sega Japan, but ultimately they passed on the project.
Our general sort of answer seemed to be that they had a few projects and they could only do so many at once because someone had to kind of like look over them, and they just didn't think that it had as much potential as other things that they had going on. So it is what it is. It was disappointing. You know, obviously we were really keen to make it. It would have been an exciting project.
Sonic Day was a secret until a few years later when Nitrome posted 1 minute of gameplay on their Twitter account. People loved it, but there was also some backlash from fans mad at Sega for rejecting the pitch. Sega weren't thrilled about it, to say the least. Nitrome never meant for that to happen, and were, quote, devastated by the negativity. They posted the footage because they made it and loved it and wanted Sonic fans to see it. Matt told us Sega has every right to reject a pitch, and he realizes what's fun isn't necessarily what's profitable. Maybe Sega made the right call. No hard feelings, especially since things kinda worked out for Nitrome anyway. After Sega said no, Apple approached them about making a sequel to Leap Day called Super Leap Day. Apple paid to make it exclusive to Apple Arcade, and the sequel ended up making just as much money as the first game. Matt couldn't say how much because of his contract, but it's a lot. And they actually took some of the ideas they would have added to Sonic Day and put them in Super Leap Day instead. For example, the Sonic demo only had vertical running, but if they'd continued development, they would have added horizontal running as well. They also would have had loop-de-loops, as you can see in this development footage that's basically halfway between Sonic and Super Leap Day. And there would have been unlockable mini-games, like the special stages from Sonic 1, and pinball stages because of the franchise's long history with pinball. Sonic Day could have been a great little game with new content 7 days a week. That leaves one last question. Could Sonic Day still get made someday? Matt says, you know, we're Sega fanboys. I had all the Sega systems growing up. We love Sega games. If Sega see this video, if they want to pick up this project or something else with us, we'd be happy. Did you ever want to know why the Chow never came back to Sonic games? For the answer to this and more, click to tap the Sonic Adventure video on screen. Or if you'd rather watch a full hour of random Sonic series trivia, click the other video. Special thanks to Matt, Miles, Ken, and Ryboflavin. And thank you for watching. See you next time.